Definitely his best speech of the past 2 years. He talked about American spirit. He talked about dreaming big. I think he converted a lot of skeptics. I like the way he went over a detailed list of his agenda items and what the foundation is going to be for the next 4 years and how he's going to then lay the bricks and build on all of that. And if you look at the polls that came out afterwards, there was a CNN poll that said 78% of the people who watched the speech now have a very positive view.
I'm looking at it, and 69% more optimistic after that speech. Interesting, though, you mentioned the details, because part of the reaction to the speech has been the fact that the tone was different. The tone was more conciliatory, but it still lacked on specifics.
Well, that's very true. Obviously, he didn't go into the nitty-gritty, and that's what he's going to have to start doing. He's going to have to start working with both Democrats and Republicans in Congress and get all those details ironed out. But most people really don't want to hear that kind of detail. I mean, he was speaking not only to members of Congress, but he was speaking to the American people, to the world. They don't want to hear those very, very detailed specifics most of the time. They just want to have that vision. They want to know what direction he's going in, and then we'll be watching to make sure that we approve of what he does and how he builds on the things he said tonight.
It's definitely a different tone. Do you think that this marks a reset, a change in direction in the Trump presidency, in the way that he addresses the crowd and the way that he tries to unify the American people?
Well, I hope so. I mean, you never know with Trump. He's not exactly predictable.
Yes.
So I certainly don't want to say it is a reset, because we don't know if he's going to be on Twitter later tonight.
Exactly. It's interesting you should say that, because one of the reactions was, one of our colleagues there mentioned that it was kind of remarkably unremarkable, and that it was a presidential kind of conventional speech from a very unconventional president, and on any other occasion we wouldn't really be talking about, how sober and presidential it is, but because Donald Trump is who he is, we're talking about it.
That's very true. That's very true. But it's funny, because I've been a Trump supporter from the beginning, and the thing I liked most that he said in that entire speech was when he went off script and talked about how he didn't want to get on the motorcycle, the Harley Davidson on the lawn. That was the moment I liked the best. Why? Because I like it when he's a regular guy and he's relating to the people as a regular guy, as opposed to a typical politician. That's what we don't want anymore in America. We want to drain the swamp. We want new blood. We want to have a new program, and we like the way that Trump is kind of ruffling feathers, and he's going to make a dent in the mindset of the past.
Interesting, though, that he didn't mention the media in that speech. I mean, he's been on a tirade of media bashing for such a long time now, but he didn't mention them in this speech.
That's true. That's very true. But and what's interesting too is that his approval rating, even though it's been around 43 to 50%. It's actually much higher than that of the media, which I believe is around 20%, or Congress, which has about a 9% approval rating. The Democrats only have a 30% approval rating as a whole. So even though it's been kind of low, it's actually pretty high for somebody in Washington, D.C.
Was there something in that speech, or was there something you wanted him to say that he didn't address?
Well, I would have personally, and this is me and a lot of people who I know who are Trump supporters in California, is I would like a little more attention on the environment. I'd like for him to care about animals and discuss that. He did talk about clean water and clean air, but that was kind of the extent of it. I personally would like more attention on that type of thing, but that's never been really part of his platform. His platform is jobs, is bringing money back to the country, is focusing on the United States. But that's what I would personally like to see, is a little more attention to the environment and animal issues.
Did anything about the economy worry you? I mean, there was a lot about spending on infrastructure, spending on defense, tax cuts. Some people took away a message of, well, wait a minute, where are we going to get the money for all of this?
Well, I like the fact that he wants to spend on infrastructure, and I like the fact that he talks about helping the inner cities. I think that's very important. He did talk about $1 trillion, he's spending $1 trillion of public and private money, but he talked about it in such a way as that it would be possibly the equal of $1 trillion. In other words, he's going to negotiate the deals. He's going to make sure that we get $1 trillion worth of infrastructure, even if we only spend $500 billion to get there. So I like the fact that he wants to make those kinds of improvements because I think we need that in our country. And it's also a bridge for bringing the Republicans and Democrats together because the Democrats normally are very much in support of building up the infrastructure and certainly in building up the inner cities and trying to bring jobs to the inner cities and have structures that are not, falling into the ground.
Well,
so, I think that's positive.
Let me pick up on that point, bringing the Democrats and the Republicans together. And you mentioned earlier he did enough to, or he converted the skeptics. Do you think that this speech was enough to bring people on the other side on board?
Well, I think so, really. I mean, I thought it was a really positive speech, and I think many of his skeptics are now converted. And, he did mention other issues besides infrastructure that I think the Democrats would be very much on board with. He talked about treatment for those who are addicted to drugs. He talked about child care and paid family leave. He talked about women in business. And he talked about defeating ISIS, which both parties are very much in favor of. So I think there are a lot of issues that they can come together and work together and build on that. So I'm very optimistic.
Charlotte, thank you so much.